Coming up, what an excellent day for mothers. Well, howdy folks, and welcome to Minute 21 of The Exorcist Minute, a show where we endeavor to examine, extrapolate, and excavate The Exorcist minute by terrifying minute. My name is Lester Clark.
And I'm Keenan Diaz.
And we'll be your holy guides on this journey through what some have called the scariest movie of all time. Okay, so our minute begins with Mary Karras welcoming her Dimmy home.
And it ends with Mary Karras saying that this is her house and she's not going anywhere.
Right. So this minute actually starts with both of them speaking in Greek. And I have a question here that maybe you can answer, Keenan. My guess is that the things they're saying in Greek are what they are also saying immediately after in English, though I wasn't able to confirm it. But I've seen this done before in other films. Do you think that's the case here?
Maybe not the exact same, but something, innocuous that we wouldn't have to have translated, right?
Right. Gets the point across, yeah.
Right.
Was there a movement or a decision in Hollywood to start using subtitles at one point?
Yeah, that there. It's not like all of a sudden, right? So it changes very gradually, and I guess it would be about this time when we started to do that in the mid 1970s. So I don't know if you know this. Can we go back? Can we go way back?
Sure. Let's go way back.
Days of early sound film.
Mm-hmm.
So originally in silent film, there were no subtitles. What you would actually do instead is you would just take out the title cards, which were between the film, the video parts, right, the visual parts. You take out the words, and so film was international. So, people knew the movies were coming from Hollywood or whatnot, but they were localized and they were often censored even, and they would change the title cards out. Easy peasy, no problem whatsoever. Then sound comes, and now we have to figure out what to do. There's no title cards to take out. So there's actually a handful of major films that are just shot twice in two different languages. Oh. So the Blue Angel, where Marlene Dietrich and Emil Jannings and their director, oh goodness, I love him. What is his name? Josef von Sternberg. Uh-huh. They all speak English and German. Because the actors are German and the director is American Austrian. And so they just do the entire movie twice. Wow. And similarly, I don't know if you know this, but Dracula, the original Dracula.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
Yes, it has, there's a version of it that Spanish speakers say is better than people who speak both English and Spanish tend to say that the Spanish version of Dracula they shot on the exact same sets, but with different actors is better than the Todd Browning, Bela Lugosi one.
I have heard that. Yes.
And I've seen it. It's hard for me. I don't know. It's hard for me to think that the Spanish one is better, but I'm not getting the nuance of the Spanish. Right. I think that's the difference for me.
You would have to be a native speaker to understand like the subtle inflections, the little,
I believe so. And I like the guy who plays the Spanish Dracula is still very good, but I like Bela Lugosi.
I mean, I think it's unavoidable. It's like Bela Lugosi is Bela Lugosi, and it's like how do you get away from that, right?
Right. And we had him. The legend of that is that he doesn't speak English well enough, so he's been given the lines, to just memorize. What do you call it phonetically?
Or are we talking about Lugosi, or are we talking
Lugosi?
about
Oh yeah, Lugosi. So I think that more recent scholarship is like that's not exactly true because here's an earlier movie where he has it, but that's the idea of why it's like I never drink wine, and he has this really weird cadence to him, right. They say part of that is because he's remembering his lines in chunks and not really knowing where the clauses are starting or ending. But I don't know, I think that's a little bit overblown, but we do have certain instances like that with Peter Lorre in his early movies like the
And folks, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Keenan, but like I just want to jump on this really, really quick. We're talking about we're talking about Bela Lugosi and his weird voice. Like if you haven't figured it out, it's the Dracula voice.
Oh yeah, what does Bela Lugosi sound?
But no, it was funny because I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you. It's like, well, this wasn't his first language, and so he spoke in this voice, and I'm just like, just so you know, that's the voice that we get. It's the Dracula voice. It's right. So anybody,
that's his Hungarian accent.
That is 100% unfiltered Lugosi, and that's why we have Adam Sandler in his movie. Doing the blah
Hotel
blah blah.
Transylvania.
Yeah, Hotel Transylvania. Yeah, like this is so if you're having trouble, imagining in your mind, like when Keenan is telling the story about Lugosi, speaking English and having trouble with it, That's the Dracula
Oh
voice.
gosh, I guess I don't know. Well, I do know some Hungarians, but I haven't. They speak great English. My experience is that most people from Eastern Europe who come to America to visit or to study, they speak better English than I do. But like, what is a Hungarian accent? Is it just Dracula?
Oh, no, and not to say no. And not to say that that's the Hungarian accent is equivalent to the Dracula voice, but just saying that the stereotype of Dracula.
Oh, that's what I mean. Yeah, the stereotype. Yes, yes.
I want to drink your blood. And all that, and which has been imitated by Count Von Count on Sesame Street, which is like every iteration of Dracula comes from the fact that the actor Bela Lugosi, this was not his first language, and so it was never intended for Dracula to have this Hungarian accent. It was
that's true.
In fact, in the book, he speaks very good English, and it actually another funny line now that we know that he's a vampire. It's one of those things where he makes an excuse. He's like, I want to go to England. And so Harker, I want you to stay with me. You're not going to go home immediately. You're going to stay with me in my castle, kept as a prisoner, and you're going to help teach me English. And Harker jumps on this immediately. He's like, but Count, you speak English perfectly. And Dracula's kind of like, oh shit. And immediately after that, he makes like several grammatical mistakes, just like, oh no, Harker, Jonathan. Oh, I mean, sorry, Jonathan Harker. That's what we do in our language is we put the patronymic first. Oh, look at this. I need your help so much.
You wily Dracula.
Yes.
Well, that's what I mean. Every Hungarian I've known in America speaks perfect English. That's what I was saying. So you can't I don't know how to do a Hungarian accent. We know how to do a French one or an Italian one or a Greek one, but what is that?
And we know how to do a Dracula accent, but that is not the same. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to keep going down this road here. So
okay.
I saw this. There's this game show. Called Actually. Do you know it?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's nerd trivia basically. And so a lot of what they do is they put purposefully incorrect information on the board, and then you have to buzz and say actually. It's this. So it's really great. So they'll put the wrong names of Star Trek planets or D&D monsters or My Little Pony characters, etc. And you go actually. And recently there was a huge kerfuffle on it because they described Count Von Count as a vampire-like Muppet. And then somebody rang and said, actually, he's not vampire-like, he's a vampire. And the host and the judge got into this argument on there. And we've been debating about this all week. That's not the right answer. That's not the right answer. But we went and we looked up and we said, is Count Von Count a vampire? And I'm like, of course he fucking is. He has the teeth. He turns into a bat, right? He just looks like Dracula. And so then they wrote into someone who they knew who worked at Sesame Street. And they said, our style guide says that he is not a vampire. He is vampire-like. So apparently the Children's Television Workshop can't have a vampire, right? They have a very heavily vampire-like puppet.
Oh my gosh. Keenan, this game show sounds like the exact type of show where you would have that kind of kerfuffle. Oh my God.
Exactly. So the judge was like, here we go again, this shit with the vampire-like.
The eternal burning question of whether Count Von Count is actually a vampire. Oh my God.
That's right. Bart Simpson asks Homer Simpson, what the hell's a Muppet? Because it's at that time period where Muppets weren't cool. Now they're cool again.
Yes.
And Homer says, well, they're not quite a puppet. They're not quite a mop. But let me tell you, and he just laughs and laughs.
Oh my God.
To answer your question, I don't know.
Yeah. But we know, I thought it was like a joining of marionette and puppet.
Yes, that's right. Marionette and puppet. Yeah. But you're smarter than Homer Simpson on that.
So if I can take home anything, I am smarter than Homer. Yeah. And now, Keenan, I fear that you have brought this curse upon us, and people are going to be writing us in about Count Von Count and whether or not he is an actual vampire or a Muppet or a vampire-like creature. We know he's a Muppet.
Goodness. There was another tweet. Sorry.
Okay.
We'll get to the extras at some point.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
There was another tweet, just a joke, funny joke tweet.
Okay.
That says, what's your favorite, one first character, what's your favorite vampire?
Okay.
And the second guy says, Count Von Count from Sesame Street.
Yeah.
And the other one says, he doesn't count. And then he says, I can assure you he does.
Oh, God. Keenan, you broke me.
Sorry, I wish I could. I'm a really bad academic, and I'll quote people and forget which book I'm quoting, so the kids can't write it down and look at. I wish I could do that with tweets. I don't remember who tweeted that, but that is so funny.
Oh, I really hope the mic captured that without peaking. Oh my God. That. Thank you for bringing in this joy, Keenan, to this otherwise joyless section.
Right.
Oh my God!
Oh, we were on subtitles. That's where. Okay, let me get back to that.
But I just want to mention. I think Count Von Count is my favorite vampire.
That he does count.
That he does count. And anybody who says he's not a vampire, come at me. exorcistminute@gmail.com, folks. You can write in. But be sure to listen to the show as well, and give us a 5-star rating. Yeah.
Oh man. So anyway, subtitles.
That's going to be our 1-star, Keenan. That's going to be our 1-star.
Oh my
God! Like Count Von Count is not a vampire.
Oh God, I hope not. Okay. So subtitles were really rare. So they finally just figured out, basically when you take a movie to Europe, they're just going to redub it with a different actor.
Huh.
Most countries in Europe do that. England doesn't. And then, America and Canada don't. They've chosen subtitles. But you're talking about in primarily English language speaking films.
Correct. Yes.
Are we subtitling? I've seen this up into 1960. There's a Greek movie, or I'm sorry, an American movie by Jules Dassin, but set in Greek. And the Greek characters have no subtitles whatsoever. And they speak a lot of Greek. And when you watch it, you're like, am I watching this wrong? The DVD not load right, and that's just the way it's supposed to be. So they have whole conversations with each other, and you're just meant to they're directed with an eye that most people in the audience aren't going to be able to tell what's going on. So let's do this very clearly and be really clear when our main character, who's an American, played by the director Jules Dassin, is confused and when he could follow, So basically, you cut back to him, and he's like, "Oh," whoa. And you're like, "Okay, well, at least I'm not the only one, right?" This guy is also confused by not having subtitles,
right? And I guess, that also depends on whether or not we are supposed to be with the main character who is also confused, or like with other people who understand the language,
right?
I guess it's unavoidable on this podcast, but The Godfather also came out around this time, and
they keep pulling us back in.
They keep pulling us back. Wow. And so, that movie has a lot of scenes with people speaking in Italian, but as far as I can remember, there's only that one scene in the restaurant with the subtitles, right?
Oh, that one? I believe there's a little bit more with Apollonia's father in Sicily, but not everything in Sicily is subtitled. Yeah.
I remember someone making a remark, it might have been a professor, that whenever there are two or more Europeans in a scene, and they're all the same flavor of European, they just speak English, usually with a British accent, and we just sort of understand that they're speaking French or German or whatever it is they're supposed to be speaking. But since there's no one around who doesn't speak that language, they just left it to be English for us.
Right. So American actors have to get their British accent on in order to play a Frenchman or a Dane, right?
Because it's just that much removed. It's it's from another country, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess the counter to that is whenever you want to make someone exotic or evil, you have them speak a different language than the one the main characters are speaking, and the choice to add subtitles or not, I guess, depends on how in the dark the director wants us to be, like you were saying, Keenan.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I guess it would be about this mid-70s point. So it's actually in the late 50s and 60s where Americans start watching foreign films, or at least a certain subset of Americans do. So the audience splits from basically during the classical period, everybody goes to see the same movies. And it's like television, basically. You go down and whatever's playing at the movie theater is what you watch. You don't really pick and choose very much.
Right.
So basically the movies are aimed at everybody. Then after the war and into the late 1950s, the audience starts to split. So we have on one side families who are going to see movies. And so those things need to be squeaky clean, really expensive looking. So Mary Poppins, Sound of Music, My Fair Lady, that has something for the adults, but also is appropriate for the children.
Yeah.
So the Ten Commandments, that kind of thing, Cleopatra. And then the other audience is a younger, hipper, it's often shorthanded as college kids. But it's also like urban elites, people who have had gone to college, that kind of thing. And they like smaller, dirtier, nastier movies with, content in them, like R-rated content before we had the term R-rated content.
Yeah.
And they can't really get that from Hollywood. So they watch foreign films because the foreign films like Bergman films are dealing with sex and drugs and loss of faith and cynicism, abortion, affairs, homosexuality, all that stuff. So the audience kind of splits. And so that younger, hipper, more educated crowd starts to see foreign films and they get used to reading subtitles. And then in the 1970s, there is still that split, but then we have the blockbuster era of basically the confluence of art films with genre films. So The Godfather, The Exorcist, Jaws, Star Wars, etc. And so I guess I haven't thought about this question before you asked, but that would make sense that's why in the mid 1970s, we start having major American films that do have subtitles.
Yeah.
So I hope I'm right in my research because you just made me think of it now. But because you're thinking of The Godfather, by the end of the decade, we'll have Annie Hall. And there's that famous scene where Annie and Alvy are on something like their first date. It's the first time they're back at her house.
Yeah.
And they're talking to each other and they're having an awkward conversation. And we get subtitles underneath them of what they're really thinking, like, oh God, he thinks I'm an idiot.
Right.
So we have things like that. Within a few years, we have Airplane, where we have our two young hip black characters who are speaking jive, quote unquote, and we have that subtitled for us. So we start having, once you could see parodies of something, then it's clear that that's become a convention, because otherwise, who is that joke for?
Right. Yeah. So it must have been going on enough for us to notice. It's like, oh, they're making a joke about the subtitles. Thank you very much, Keenan. I always love these little delvings into cinema history. This is always great.
Well, yeah, you made me think about that. So now I'm going to have to look and double check the thesis I just came up here. So, hopefully people can, if you find that I'm wrong, that's great. go and look at those things. But yeah, I think it would be the combination of these two audiences in the 1970s coming back to watch the same movies. That would be my guess.
Yeah. And again, if you find that Keenan is wrong, please write in because we'd love to hear from you. And it's a requirement for this one. You have to start your email with, actually. So again, I love the opening to this scene. We have mother and son reunited. Mom is so happy to see Damien, which again, I think sort of makes this like more heartbreaking because we see how Karras feels guilty about his mother living here alone, a world away. What did we say, like 4.5 hours away?
Right. Mm-hmm. If I could, I'd like to read from the screenplay here.
Yes.
That deals with some of the stuff from before in our previous minute, but just how we describe this life that Mary has and what it's like for Damien to go back to his neighborhood. With all of the readings of the screenplay so far, there's some of it that is very similar to the book, obviously. Sometimes Blatty is just copying and pasting, or, not literally because he's doing it on a typewriter, right? But I guess I'd love to read this a little.
Of course, yeah.
A reading from the screenplay of Blatty. Oh, and I do want to point out that this scene here is, what do we say, minute 20. This is substantially later in the original screenplay. We have a lot of scenes of Chris and Reagan.
Right, I noticed
before
that, yeah.
we see Mary.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Exterior, high shot, East 21st Street in New York City, day. Between 1st and 2nd Avenues. Karras walks despondently along the south side of the street, which is studded with decrepit tenement buildings. He pauses before one, and with melancholy sees his past in the raggedly clothed, grime-covered, foul-mouthed urchins pitching pennies against the stoop. Karras looks up the front door. He starts up the steps. Interior hall. Karras outside mother's apartment door. Cutting, we find the camera stationed by an apartment front door, trained on Karras mounting steps at far end of hall. He approaches and lightly raps. From within, we hear faint sound of a radio turn to news station. Karras waits a moment, then digs out keys from pants pocket, opens door like an aching wound, and enters. Interior tenement apartment, day. The radio now more audible. We're in a railroad flat kitchen, tiny. Cracked plaster and peeling wallpaper, unkempt, sparse and ancient furnitures. In the kitchen, a small tub for bathing. Faded old newspapers spread on the uncarpeted floor. As Karras enters, he breathes in an aching sigh as his gaze brushes around at the painful reminders of his past. Then he glances to right, from which we hear sound of radio. He puts down valise and starts into bedroom. Karras, Mama? No response. Camera follows him into squalid living room. Karras now sees his mother, fully dressed, sleeping on a torn and grease-stained old sofa. On her right cheek, a prominent mole. He observes her for a moment, sighs as he removes raincoat. As he drapes it over a chair, his mother awakens with a slight start, sees him, reacts with surprise and joy, speaking with a thick Mediterranean accent. Mother, Dimmy. She hastily gets to feet and throws arm around Karras. Oh, Dimmy, I'm so glad to see you. Great.
Yeah.
So we definitely see, Blatty the novelist choosing to spend a lot of time describing what this space feels like. He doesn't always. So this is an Oscar-winning screenplay. He's been a screenwriter for a very long time. He doesn't slow down the movie every time we enter a new space like this. This seems to be very, very important to him to get this right about the loneliness and the that she's living in this space that gives the sense that things have been wrong for decades.
Yeah, this has been a while. This is an old, as actually to quote Blatty again a little bit later in the book, Karras reflects. He says, "This grief was old."
Mm.
And to that point, we know that she doesn't get many visitors. And how do we know this? We know this because in the next scene, Karras is at the table. Mom has fixed up something for him, and she's sitting and watching him eat. Again, this is so... The first thing she does, Keenan, the first thing she does is make him something to eat. She can barely move around. She shouldn't be moving around, as we come to find. But the first thing she does when her son comes to see her is make him something. And I can see this scene, even though it's not in the book or the movie, even though Blatty didn't pen a word of it, I can see her bustling around, getting out the olives and the cheese, and him like, "No, Mama, sit down," and her like swatting him away. Mm-hmm. And then she's sitting, and then he's sitting there eating. And quick break. Let's take a look at this food, because I want to like avoid talking about this, but I love food in film, and I can't be the only one who like focuses on it whenever it's present
there
in
are
film.
Definitely people who, there's blogs about like meals of cinema.
Yeah, it's got to be. Even one like I found online because I was trying to find what this specific dish was, and there's this website called Food and Film, and it didn't. I'm still unsure about exactly what this is. But before we get to that, Keenan, do you have like a favorite food in film like scene?
Oh my! The first thing I think of is Ratatouille.
Yes,
where we were just talking about that in my class actually. So in Ratatouille, we get this fantastic description of what it is to be a food artist, because Remy, his name is not Ratatouille, his name is Remy. Remy is describing to his brother Emile, and he's at the very beginning like these foods have different feelings to them, and then the way that they cinematize that is that they essentially imply or they give Remy synesthesia. So synesthesia is this idea that some people experience what we typically experience in one of our senses, they experiencing it across their senses. There's probably a better description of it than that you could look up. But there are some people who musical notes have texture to them. Certain letters have color, and we had been thinking about that, not me, but we had been treating that as some illness of theirs, and now we're more seeing that's like a superpower, right? It's like amazing that you have this. So they give Remy synesthesia essentially. And he's like, when I taste this cheese, it feels electric. And then we see electricity on it. And we taste this strawberry and it feels like swirls and we see the swirls. So I think when they were creating it, they were just trying to find like this really visual cinematic way of doing it. But I think retroactively, we look and they have made Remy neurodivergent in some way.
Interesting.
Without maybe meaning to. And I was telling that to my students in class, and a lot of them were like, oh, I have, this or that. Like, I forget what it was, and I don't necessarily want to give away people's private, but they were like, oh, when numbers to me or the alphabet feels like this or that. And I said, oh, you might want to look into it. You might have this superpower called synesthesia. And more than a couple of them were like, oh, wow. like I have that. So maybe look that up if you can. And then at the end, you know Ratatouille pretty well, I imagine.
Oh, yes.
The last shot of Anton Ego when he eats the ratatouille, and we go into his eye and experiencing it from his point of view. That floors me every single time. When you watch it in context, like having seen an hour and 20 minutes of the movie and hating that character. And
we know what type of, we've been presented one side of this character throughout the whole movie.
Right. And oh God, I might get too moved, but then you go into his mind and and then you see him as a child and see that warmth that his mother had for him and what food means to him and all this stuff that obviously the movie is more elegant than my words describing it, but it just knocks me away every single time I see it.
Yeah. No, that is everybody. Like if you haven't seen it, I love how we're recommending other movies on the Exorcist Minute. But no, definitely go see Ratatouille because it's very good.
My friends and I debate like what's the best Pixar movie, and I think the safe choices are Wall-E and Up. I think that's the safe choices. But then we're like, but every time we go back and watch Ratatouille, it goes right back to the top of the list. Nothing against Up and Wall-E, which are
No. Yeah.
genius films.
Yeah, go see those too. Yeah.
Right. You don't have to pick one. You're not on a desert island yet.
Yeah.
And what about you? Do you have a favorite food memory in film?
The funny thing is I had this in my notes to ask you, and I just didn't even bother thinking of one myself. But I think ones that stand out to me, from a very young age, it's always cartoons. I think for some reason, I don't know if it's because of the colors are brighter, or the food just looks the best it can possibly look. Or like the sound work or whatever, but it's always cartoons. And like the first one that I think of is Lady and the Tramp, and when they're eating the spaghetti, right? And he rolls the little meatball over there, and it's just like, oh man, I want some spaghetti right now so much.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. It's like impossibly long and fun. So it's not just the flavor of it; it's the experience of it, and being with somebody. And yeah. Or
when they're eating pizza in All Dogs Go to Heaven, and they have that the cheese just stretches on forever, right? All of those movies. I think cartoons do it really well. They make food kind of like almost exaggerated to the point of absurdity, but it's like that's what you taste. That's in your mind.
If you want to ruin it for yourselves, so if you don't like ruining things for yourselves, don't do this. But if you can look at behind the scenes of what a food stylist does on a commercial, and with the kind of inedible things they're making, so that long stretch in the Pizza Hut commercials of that cheese, it's not cheese, it's glue.
Literally glue. Yeah,
and it's like it's the bread is bolted down to the table. Literally glue. Maple syrup on pancakes in commercials is motor oil.
But no, and I mean, it works. It's through the lens of the camera. It translates it beautifully. And hey, we don't have to eat that glue pizza. But we can call pizza. Wow, we're sponsoring just like so many.
Oh, Pizza Hut again.
Yeah,
Pizza
there we
Hut.
go. Right.
Come calling.
Yeah. Pizza Hut, Coke. Come on, guys. Like, how can you pass up a podcast like this? Anyway, but yeah. Like speaking of pizza, Home Alone.
Oh God! Yeah.
I mean, oh my gosh! Little Nero's. Like you gotta have Little Nero's. And how old was I? I was way too. I was much older than I should have been to realize. Like, oh, haha, Little Nero's. Ha. Okay.
Oh, I just got that now. So that's a John Hughes joke that I just got explained to me. Thank you, Lester.
There we go. So Little Caesars also like, hey,
pizza.
Yeah, pizza. Okay, so I looked all over for what this food in our scene could be, specifically the main dish that he's dipping the bread into, and I'm guessing like it could be tzatziki, some type of yogurt, but I'm also seeing chunks of stuff in there, like maybe potatoes. So it could be a stew, maybe.
I wonder.
Yeah, he's dipping the bread in there, and close at hand we got some more bread, some olives, and what looks like some brie.
Oh, that would be feta, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, there
Greek,
we go.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
It's like a hard. It's crumbly.
Okay.
My boyfriend taught me this term. I wish I could remember Italian. He's a music major, or was a music major, and he knows a lot of Italian and German and French that I don't because he had to sing it. But he talks about when at the end of an Italian meal, at least, you have the bread loaf, and you take the crust of the bread, and it has that rounded part on the top of the loaf,
right? Mm-hmm.
And to basically, if you break a crust of bread in half, it looks like little shoes.
Oh,
so in Italy, they'll say, we make the little shoes, the scarpetto, and then that's what we use to eat the sauce is the little shoes.
Oh, I love that. Oh,
and
my gosh.
we were at this Italian restaurant in LA downtown. Oh, that I hope is still there, but with COVID, things are bad. And there's this woman who came out as our waitress, and she had a thick Italian accent. And in LA, and you're in LA, sometimes you wonder like, is it a real Italian accent,
right?
Or is this like, hey, we're at an Italian restaurant. Here's my waitress. She's an actor, and she's trying to get better tips, etc. And so I was worried about this. My boyfriend speaks to her in Italian as far as he can to describe and getting more bread for the shoes. And she looks at him, and he repeats it and is like, slower this time and pronounces it scarpetto. And we're looking, and I'm like, oh God, he's accidentally like embarrassed this,
Oh no.
this woman who doesn't speak Italian.
Oh no.
But then she says, oh yes, to make the little shoes. I'll be back. I'm like, oh, thank God. Secondhand embarrassment is not what I want for this poor woman.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, and who knows? Like, it could have been like maybe a regional thing too. Like, I mean,
Right.
maybe she did speak Italian, and he's talking about something that like maybe only a certain specific
right. And I think his accent, from college years ago. But anyways, luckily she was really Italian.
Well, there we go.
And then we get these shots, right, of him eating alone. I think it's really sort of sad that she has two places at the table, when no one ever comes to visit her. Like she has two chairs there, and then we see her watching him in this rocking chair and just so happy he's there. She doesn't have to eat herself, right?
And I can I can see that scene too. It's like, Mama, are you gonna? Oh no.
And it might be right that, oh, I don't want to eat, but it's more likely, right? Like we only have enough for one person, right? She's like forgoing a meal for herself.
Oh God, Keenan, I didn't even think about that.
Well, why would she have a grown man size meal, right?
I don't know, because she wants to see her son eat. I don't. Oh,
but he doesn't. He doesn't come over, so she only has enough in the refrigerator for herself. Anyways, I wanted to talk about what I like about this scene is that, as I said in the last minute, we see Father Karras like stripping off of his uniform, right, and becoming more like a regular looking guy, and now he's more like a son. And I think it strikes me as being so different from how we've seen priests in movies before that. There's a lot of famous movies about priests from the classical days. So we have Boys Town with Spencer Tracy from 1939 that he won an Oscar for. We have Bing Crosby in Going My Way, which he won an Oscar for. And then the sequel, The Bells of St. Mary, which is what Diane Keaton and Al Pacino go to on their date in The Godfather.
Right.
And we have like Father Barry in On the Waterfront, who's played by Carl Malden. And these characters, like, these are like stalwart men. They're always in uniform, right? They're always priests. And most of the time we don't get an inkling of their personal life, let alone their family life. That's so separate. So all of those movies, even though those characters, like especially with Bing Crosby and Spencer Tracy, they're the main characters, and it's about them going into the community and helping people who need it. The movie starts when they come into the space. So we don't see them outside of their work as a priest. Right. We don't see them going back. We don't see them. So not even the questions of doubt, which sometimes is there in some of those older movies, but just seeing what a priest looks like when they are not at church or not serving the community. Because it's always, it's always Bing Crosby, meeting with these kids says, well, Maria, you sure have a lot of problems, and it makes me think of a little song. Let me he's at the piano.
Yeah.
And they're always on, right? Because that's their job. And part of those movies is, having a reverence for them in their job and not making them seem human.
Right. And I mean, like, actually to that point, there is a part in the book that I think is unintentionally funny, or maybe just like sweet and cute, when Karras finally ends up going to Chris's home. She kind of like turns back to him, before he enters that room that we're going to talk about. And she turns back to him. It's like, shouldn't you, don't you want to go in with your priest clothes? Because he's not dressed. He's not in uniform. Right. And he says, like, it's meant as a joke. He's like, too risky. And this is just he's at this point, he's appeasing her. He's just going in to see this girl. He's not, right. He doesn't even think, well, I don't know what he thinks yet, but I like that line of like, too risky.
Right.
But yeah. And then also to that, but like, there's another moment in the book where Chris is having a party, and tell me if you do this, Keenan. But she has a party with a bunch of different people, a bunch of like these notable people. One of them is an astronaut, right. And I don't know if you know where I'm going with this, Keenan, but whenever I read a book where there's a group of people and one of them is an astronaut or a fireman, in my head I cannot help but think of like everybody else is at this party and they're just wearing normal clothes. And then you got this astronaut walking
That's never occurred to me, but of course.
Okay,
he
so maybe
wants
it's
you to
just
know
me.
he's an astronaut.
He wants you
sure.
to. But no, Keenan, I've read this book, I don't know how many times. Every time I read it, I have a little chuckle because it's like, oh yeah, Chris is throwing this party. And, she's got this priest who is wearing, priest clothes.
Mhm.
And she's got this senator, and she's got this other person, and this astronaut who's just kind of in the background, just, like he's walking in slow motion. I don't know. Anyway, okay. But getting back to our scene now, we come to find that Mom doesn't get many visitors, like you were talking about, Keenan. Damien's uncle John, her brother, came by to see her a month ago, and just the fact that she's bringing this up means that it was maybe a rare occurrence.
Right.
And you can see Damien's reaction to that. He sort of pauses as he's taking a drink, and he looks down and he nods, right? So he's kind of like taking it in that, yeah, she doesn't get a lot of visitors, right? And he sort of knew this, right? And this means that this is the first time Damien has heard about it, which means he hasn't been over there in at least a month, right? Which also means, oh my God, whatever is going on with Mary's leg, we're going to see it in a second here, has been going on for that long as well, because Karras already knew about it, right? That's the first thing he asks at the beginning of this scene. He says, "How's your leg?" Right? And so, yeah, let's go to that scene. Karras is bandaging her leg, or maybe just like wrapping it up. I don't know. Do we think this is a sprained leg or a broken leg, or she's just like older and it pains her, right?
In the screenplay, he has a scene with the uncle, and they are describing it, and the uncle says that she has edema, which is a swelling, a retaining of fluids.
Okay. So that's what it must be. And I want to say this right here. This is some amazing acting by Vasiliki Maliaros. There's so many subtle expressions going on in this scene, and again, all from someone who this is her first and only role, but she knows how to convey these very, very subtle emotions. Damien is wrapping it. He asks her if it's too tight, and she says no. But you can see in her face that she is in pain, and she's trying to not show this to her son. Right? He tells her that she has to stay off the leg. She can't go up and down those stairs. Those stairs Friedkin made sure to show us as Damien is walking up, right, in the previous minute. Imagine this poor lady going up and down those stairs with no one to help her, right? So she says, okay, she'll stay off it, but I don't know, maybe it's just me. I read this as like she says okay to sort of like appease him, but she's going to do what she's got to do, because who else is going to do it, Dimmy? Right? And I think he knows that. And I think this is a scene that has played out before, which again makes it all the more heartbreaking. And the next thing he says is also probably something that they've gone over many and many a time, right? He wants to take her somewhere safe where, she wouldn't be alone, listening to that radio, and you see her whole face change again. It's so great. As soon as he's done with her leg, her hand goes up to rest her head. But then when he starts talking about moving her out, that hand goes down and that stern look appears. And again, this is something that actors I've seen in LA have trouble with, right? So much so that like they teach whole classes about it. And that is reacting to somebody else's line, right? So many times actors are just like standing there, not hearing what the other actor is saying, not listening, just sort of waiting for their turn to speak. But you see this beautiful performance from Vasiliki as she realizes, oh, here we go again. My son is talking about moving me out, right? And she leans forward and she says, "Akusa Dimmy," which means listen to me, Dimmy, right? And then she says in Greek, and I checked, she says, "I'm not going anywhere. This is my house."
Right. Wow. Yeah. It's a lot of first actors' problems, or young actors, and I mean like inexperienced actors rather, that they think the most important thing is, how many lines do you have in the school play? I have the most lines. That's the most important thing. How am I saying this? And Juliet has more lines than the nurse in Romeo and Juliet, but the nurse is a much better part.
Oh my God, by far,
Right,
by far.
by far. And you have trouble convincing young actors of that sometimes. Again, inexperienced actors is what I mean. That's what they say in the industry, which is really demeaning. They'll call them young actors when they just mean experience, baby writers, meaning that they haven't sold anything yet, stuff like that. So sorry, my Hollywood asshole speak was coming in there. But yeah, here we have an inexperienced actor who, is doing all the things you would want from an old pro.
Yeah. And that is where our minute ends, and we'll pick up in the next minute with her saying the same thing in English, perhaps to give us, or perhaps to give it some emphasis, and of course to help our audience. But for now, I think that's all the notes I have. Keenan, do you have anything else that you want to add for this minute?
I think we got it.
All right. Okay. So, Keenan, are you thinking what I'm thinking?
I think I am, Lester.
Okay, folks. Until next time.
The power of Count Von Count compels you.
21 minutes. Ha, 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 ha.